Hello and welcome into Off the Bench. I'm Reed Mouse. And we got a great show for you today here on a Thursday, second last day of the week. Bengals gearing up for their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We had some more news on the injury reports, and I didn't get a whole lot to talk about my interview with Jay Morrison yesterday. So there were some things that we talked about yesterday that I want to get into. We also have a little bit of Reds news. I know Stone had a great interview with Mark Sheldon yesterday, and then the Reds made noise for being in for one of the premier relievers in the sport, Devin Williams. I'll give you my opinion on that. And, of course, because we had all of the interviews yesterday, we had to push back everyone's favorite segment, the mailbag, which will take up a great majority of today's show. We'll do that later on. I'm Reed Mouse, as I mentioned. Stone Shields, the producer extraordinaire in the office today. Stone, as always, thank you so much for being here.
Hyped, fired up. Here we are on a Thursday, a couple of days before Bengals-Steelers, and you were telling me I needed to go to the UC game next Friday against Louisville at Heritage Bank.
Yeah, you got tickets?
I'll be there.
You got tickets?
How about that? Yeah, I'll be there. So looking forward to that. Hopefully.
Good ticks?
I don't know yet, actually. My buddy texted yesterday, and he was like, I got an extra ticket. You want to come? I was like, yeah, I'll come. Even though, we were disrespecting Heritage Bank a little bit. Obviously, I'm still going to go. But I would imagine they're solid tickets. I don't know exactly, but should be hopefully the Cats can hang in there. But it should be a lot of fun.
Do you know their soda of choice at the Heritage Bank Arena?
No.
Do you know what brand? I know you're not a big – you used to be a big pop drinker. What would you guess the soda is at Heritage Bank?
Pepsi?
It is not. It is Royal Crown Cola. It is
What?
RC Cola. They do not serve Coca-Cola or Pepsi. They serve RC Cola at the Heritage Bank Center.
That's outlandish.
Yeah, it might be the only one in the world for all I know. But you enjoy yourself an RC Cola next week.
I've never had one. Are they any good?
Do you like cola?
I mean, I like Coke and Pepsi.
Okay, so imagine if Coke, imagine you took a big glass and you took a little bit of Coke and took a little bit of Pepsi and you spun it all together. That's what we're It tastes it tastes like you mixed the two together.
Okay. Maybe I'll sample.
So you enjoy yourself some RC Cola. Hey, I'm glad because you went to the game earlier this week. You are a true
I might go to every game.
UC Bearcats fan, and I'm really excited for you. And we got an exciting show for today. First thing I wanted to talk about, obviously I listened to Chatterbox Reds this morning because I had a take once you see the news that the Reds are in or flirting with bringing in former Milwaukee Brewer, former New York Yankee, Devin Williams to, anchor the Reds bullpen this coming season. And while that's great, right? Anytime that your favorite sports team is going after premier players at their position, that's a great thing. Absolutely no doubt about it. But here's my cause for concern, and it's just a general sentiment that I have when constructing a Major League Baseball roster. And that is when you are a team on a budget, and the Reds undoubtedly are a team on a budget. You cannot mix bones about that. In fact, the only other big news that have come out this week is that the Reds have about $15 to $20 million this offseason to toy around and to improve this roster. When you are a team on a budget, you can go ahead and make this your creed. You can make this your indoctrination, which is this. You cannot spend big money on a relief pitcher. You just can't. You cannot go after the elite names as a relief pitcher because, point blank, that is a luxury you cannot afford. Relief pitchers are valuable, no doubt about it. Someone that can shut the door late in the ball game, someone that can get you out of a jam when the bases are loaded and you need a strikeout. There's absolute value in that. But you cannot take up a great majority of your payroll to get one of those players. It's like if your family was on a budget. You're living paycheck to paycheck like so many of us are. And you decide, you know what? I think it's time we take that trip down to Cancun at the all-inclusive. Let's go on a week-long vacation and really just enjoy ourselves. Yeah, that's fun. That's great. It's going to be a memory. It's going to be something that you hold on to. But you know deep down that you can't be doing that. It doesn't make sense for the budget. It sets you back. It lessens your chance to make other financial moves. The Reds cannot afford to do that. You've got to be consistently going in the bargain bin. And the reason is simple. It's probably the least valuable place on the field, relief pitching. And it's a heartache. It's a heartache when you have a bad bullpen and they're consistently blowing games. No doubt about that either. But offering, and the reports coming out from like MLB Trade Rumors and other places, is this guy's going to be wanting somewhere in the range of $15 million a year. I mean, maybe it's a little less than that, but those are the reports. How can the Reds think that it's viable to go after a guy that wants even 12 and a half, 13, 14, $15 million a year for a guy that's only going to throw about 60, 70 innings? I've talked about this before, and I'll continue to say it. The currency of baseball isn't runs, it's outs. How can you get to the end of the year getting as many outs as possible? And yeah, I've already established relief pitchers are valuable. If you can have one, that's fantastic. If you have a great lockdown relief pitcher, it's fantastic. But you cannot be spending $15 million. You cannot be taking a great portion of your budget for 70 innings. Especially with the volatility that relief pitchers often come with. It's not just the fact that they take up such a small portion of the outs that you're going to record over a season. It's the fact that more often than not, there's not a more volatile position in the sport. Year in and year out, we see guys that one season, lights out, nails. 1.4 ERA. Next year, 4.5. Maybe their fastball isn't located as much. Maybe they lost a tick off it. Maybe their curveball isn't fooling hitters. Whatever the reason is, we see volatility. And the other reason that you can't do this is because you can get good relief pitchers on the cheap. Got to have a good scouting department. You got to have a good pitching coach or a good pitching development sometimes to get either these young guys or these old guys that just need a new scenery. But frequently, we see this every single year. We see guys that have struggled elsewhere. You bring them in, you teach them a new pitch, you tell them to focus on this pitch, and all of a sudden, they're a really good reliever. And you can do that dirt cheap. Now, there's going to be a lot of misses, a lot of swings and misses, but you can afford to do that. You can't afford to put $15 million on the payroll when you're already a very small payroll for a relief pitcher. Admittedly, he can be one of, if not the best relief pitcher in the game. I get it. Fully understand it. But it's just too big of a risk. With how much money you're going to be losing, with how volatile the position can be, and the fact that you can get cheaper somewhere else, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It never will make sense to me. Now, do I think that even with this report that the Reds were going to sign Devin Williams? No. No, I don't think that. But it's just a reminder. It's the analogy I can make this to is close to football. And this isn't a one-for-one analogy, but it's the closest one I got if I'm trying to loop it back to football. And it's that running backs. Look at running backs. For a long time, we've understood that running backs aren't the most valuable position. There's a reason guys like, even though Derrick Henry is, one of the best running backs in the league, he got paid, $8 million last year? Saquon Barkley can move team to team. It's because that's a luxury that teams that have a full, complete roster, they can spend money on the running back to add it. But when you're a team like the Miami Dolphins, when you're a team like the New York Jets, and it's time to pay a running back, you can't do it because there's more valuable places elsewhere. Even the Bengals here in town, we can't pay for a big running back because it just doesn't make any sense. That's why you got to let guys like Joe Mixon go. The reason that we extended Joe Mixon when we did was because we weren't paying a quarterback or wide receivers at the time. So that's when it makes sense. But the second his contract's done, all right, see you else. See you later. I said it's not a perfect analogy, but teams like the Dodgers, teams like the Yankees, teams like the Blue Jays, teams even like the Cubs here in the division, when they have a more complete roster, when they have more money to work with, those are luxuries they can afford. The Reds cannot do it. But you could be asking, all right, well, Devin Williams didn't have the best year last year. What if he wants to reestablish his market, which has been reported? that he wants to maybe get a shorter deal, not the 3-4 year long relief pitching deals that we've seen in the league, but wants to come in for 1 year and prove it. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, if the Reds can get him on a prove it deal, then yeah, sure. If you can get him cheap, if you're buying, a discounted Devin Williams, sure. But I'll ask this point blank question: if he's on a prove it deal, if he's wanting to reestablish his market in the league, why would he do it in Cincinnati? Are the Reds constantly going to be – are they going to be a 95-win team where he's going to get a lot of, I know that's a bad stat, but saves or opportunities with leads to establish himself as a dominant force at the back end as the closer of your bullpen? No, not really. We're looking at a team that on the best case is an 86-win team. Okay, is he going to have a hitter or pitcher-friendly ballpark like Petco Park or Comerica Park? Or no, you've got the most hitter-friendly ballpark where he's going to give up some home runs throughout the course of the year that he wouldn't give elsewhere. Okay. Well, do they at least have a great defense that, maybe a ball squeaks through and Key Brian Hayes is fantastic at third base? But no, the Reds, quite honestly, though they are getting better defensively, don't have a good defense either. There's nothing that makes you think that Devin Williams would come here to Cincinnati on a prove-it deal. There's nothing that would make you believe that, okay, I want to prove it. Let's prove it in Cincinnati where I'm going to play in a home run friendly ballpark with a bad defense behind me and for a team that's going to be mediocre or, at the very best, an 87-win team. It's exciting, no doubt about it, anytime you see your team in the news as going after someone elite at their position. But it'd be malpractice for the Reds to spend their very small budget on a guy like Devin Williams. Stone, I know you saw the reports. I know you talked to Mark Sheldon yesterday. Mm-hmm. Reports came out afterwards. Do you have any opinions on, the Reds going after a guy like Devin Williams, who admittedly one of the best relief pitchers in baseball when he's on? He had kind of a lackluster year last year. Do you have any opinions on if this is a guy that the Reds, with their budget, should go after? I'm
with you. It's kind of like, do you want Devin Williams on your team? Based on what I saw him do against the Reds when he was in Milwaukee, yeah, you would love to have it. Admittedly, I didn't watch him very closely in New York. You said it wasn't, necessarily up to his standards this past year. But yeah, with a small small market team that doesn't have a huge budget, relief pitching, especially when the offense is as bad or lackluster as it was last year, I don't know necessarily if that's the right call when you're talking about allocating your payroll. If the Reds got Devin Williams, am I going to be necessarily upset about it? No. I just remember him in Milwaukee just being absolutely nasty. And
yeah,
he has that,
the airbender.
Right, the airbender. That's what it is. Yeah, just a nasty pitch. And he was, the Reds couldn't hit him when he was in Milwaukee. So, yeah, it would be great to have that kind of presence in your bullpen. But then is that taking away from getting a potential bat that could help you out offensively? So I would say my gut says, yeah, probably stay away. But if this is a situation where you go out and get Devin Williams, I'm not going to sit here and complain about it.
Right. It is almost like – so I made the analogy earlier. It's like if you're going paycheck to paycheck,
yeah,
and you're like, you know what? I've been working hard. Let's go down to Cancun for the week. Let's go down to Mexico, stay at an all-inclusive vacation, all-inclusive resort. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fantastic. I'm sure you'll have a blast for that week, but does it make sense in the budget? Absolutely not. You know that deep down there's going to create more problems by doing that. Now, have fun by doing that, by all means, but you just can't. Now, the other news that the Reds made yesterday is they got Ben Rortvedt, the catcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who played a good portion of September with Will Smith down and everything like that. In fact, had some big moments there. And immediately you start wondering, what does this mean? Because he has no options left to go down to AAA. He's on the 40-man roster. So you start wondering, what does this mean for the current catching room for the Cincinnati Reds? And just reading through the weeds here, I'll tell you this. Jose Trevino is getting paid about $6 million, I believe, just south of that, if what I saw earlier is correct. Either him, getting rid of him for money, because Ben Rortvedt is pretty similar to a Jose Trevino type. Really good defensive catcher. Can't hit a lick. He's now had 600 at-bats over the course of 5 years in the MLB. And, yeah, it's not been good. It's not been good at the plate. So you've got two really good defensive catchers that can't hit their weight. I know Jose Trevino played well at certain points last year, but for his entire career, you've known that he's a lackluster hitting catcher. I would smell that this would say that the Reds are going to get rid of one of their two catchers on the team, whether that be Jose Trevino to create more money, to get kind of creative, and you get rid of that $6 million roster spot for Trevino, or you get rid of Tyler Stevenson and bring in some talent, because you will be able to bring in. I've said this before. I'm a big Tyler Stevenson believer, and there's very few teams that would say no to a player like Tyler Stevenson. There are very few teams that would take their catcher over Tyler Stevenson. There's only probably one in the division, William Contreras with the Brewers. Over the course of National League, Will Smith, Drake Baldwin. But there's not many teams in the National League that have a better catcher than Tyler Stevenson, especially with the upside. Now, he's hurt a lot, but he's got the upside to be a very talented player. And especially when you're not going to rely on him to be a middle-of-the-order guy like he is here in Cincinnati. He could be like your 7-8 hole hitter and just be really good at that. Final thing I have to say about Ben Rortvedt is that he's apparently a really good framer, and what a Reds move to get a really good framer in the era where framing literally might not matter. Literally might not matter anymore, which is, there's a grander question that I've wondered, is what is the role of the defensive catcher going to be? Because for forever, you've seen guys like Doug Marabelli, and you name Jason Varitek wasn't a great hitting catcher. Yadier Molina was a good hitting catcher at certain points of his career. But the point is Jeff Mathis. We've seen catchers have 15-year careers in Major League Baseball, and with the current evolving game to where they don't need a frame anymore with automatics, balls, and strikes, where a lot of the times in PitchCom, pitchers are calling their pitches, so they don't even need it. Like, what is the role of a defensive catcher going to be? All you need to be there to be is a backstop, and every once in a while just have a cannon for an arm. So it's going to be interesting to see where the evolution of catcher is come 5-10 years. Are we just going to tell big dudes with giant arms like, hey, you're going to sit back there, we don't need you to do anything else except for throw people out, you don't need to call the games, you don't even need to frame well, there's no art to the position anymore, just have a cannon and just make sure no balls get by you. It's interesting to say the least over the next 5 years. So Ben Rortvedt and what it smells for the Reds going forward. All right, other news came out yesterday, and that is regarding our Cincinnati Bengals. That's a team we're going to cheer to victory. Shamar Stewart reportedly is week to week, meaning that our first-round pick from this most recent draft, the guy who maybe more than any other Bengal has had highlights thrust upon the internet this season, is not going to play this weekend, along with Trey Hendrickson, who's not going to play this weekend, and might not play for the weeks to come. And you got, oh my God. Oh, can you imagine what this defense is going to look like without Shamar Stewart, this already historically, hilariously bad defense? Can you imagine? What are they going to do without Shamar Stewart? And yeah, it's hard to give an opinion on this at all. Because quite honestly, they might be better without their first overall pick taking up snaps. And that's saying Miles Murphy never screams out on tape, I'm doing great things. Joseph Asai, if he was your fourth pass rusher, that's a good player. When you need him to be your second pass rusher, your second best pass rusher, or on this weekend be your best pass rusher, it's not a very good team to be in. But who knows? Maybe this Bengals defense will play better without their first round pick from this past year. And I hate to lament it, but there was something that Jay Morrison said yesterday. Brought him on. Thank you so much, Jay, for coming on yesterday. But I tried to get something positive out of him. I was like, hey, give me any reason at all to have optimism about this Bengals defense. Give me something to believe in. Give me, Jordan Battle's taking really good snaps at defense, or, they changed the scheme up a little bit, or Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight are coming. Give me anything regarding this defense and why I think that it could get better. And Jay just point blank said, there is none. There is no reason. And I hate it. I wanted some positive momentum whatsoever. But to be point blank, he's right. It's a hopeless place to be, to sit here and look at this Bengals team, which just felt like it got a shot in the arm of adrenaline, that we might have Joe Burrow back come a couple weeks. But this team truly has nothing coming over the hill to make you think that this defense is going to get better. It just is what it is. And the only positive that you can take away is it feels like they can't play worse. It feels like there's no player that's going to make this team better. Maybe Trey Hendrickson when he comes back from injury. But this defense is what it is, and it's going to continue to trend to be the worst defense in the league and possibly the worst defense of this century, millennia, and the worst defense in the history of the National Football League. Stone, we didn't get a break into it a whole lot after the Jay Morrison interview yesterday. Mm-hmm. Your opinion, because I try to.
Yeah.
I try to find optimism. I try to always spin it positively, like, oh, this might happen. Like I'm doing right now with the Bengals season. They're 3-6. Oh, what happens if they beat the Steelers this week? And he point blank just said, no, there is no positive. There is nothing that would make you think that this defense is going to get better. What was your takeaway from the point that he said that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I agree with him, right? Because he brought up a great point in your interview yesterday where he was like, okay, last year, Lou Anarumo, and like I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a big X's and O's guy. I know you don't try to act like that either, but talking about the scheme and how, with Anarumo, the scheme can be a little bit more complicated than, certainly Al Golden. And the switch that they made was, we got to make this thing as simple as possible last year. And they did, and it resulted in some better play down the stretch for the Bengals defensively. Now, the counter-argument to that is, yeah, but Stone, they didn't play any elite quarterbacks or any good quarterbacks, really, down the stretch last year. Completely agree. But with this scheme with Al Golden, it's it's down to the bones already. It's pretty simple, and there's nothing you can really do to make it more simple. So I don't know if there's any, schematic changes they can make, any coaching changes they can make. They're kind of just rolling with the guys they got, and that's kind of why you feel like, or certainly Jay feels that way, where it's like, how can you expect this thing to get any better? I think, one thing you can hold on to is, I said on the show that I'm out already on Shamar Stewart, that, a lot of people are going to say you're ridiculous fan, and that's fine. But I do think, unfortunately, we need to be a little bit patient with the linebackers. It's just they're rookies, right? And they're, it's not like they have a running mate that is a really good player, right? You traded him away. Your running mate is also a rookie, and behind a bad defensive line, that can create a lot of issues. And a lot of times they're in the right spots. Maybe they're a tick slow reacting, but Barrett Carter's missed a lot of tackles. You hope that that's something that can improve. And Demetrius Knight, you hope he can read things out a little bit quicker and not be a half a step late. Because in the NFL, you can't be a half step late. In college, you can rely on your athleticism and your speed and your physicality and your quickness to make up for some of that. It doesn't really happen here in the NFL. So hopefully those linebackers can play a little bit faster, and that can kind of bleed throughout the rest of the defense, and they can play a little bit better.
It is funny because you see those reports. You see the PFF grades. Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, the rookie linebackers that are playing for this Bengals defense, are the worst graded linebackers in the league according to Pro Football Focus. But Jay said this yesterday, and I agree with this just based off what my eyeballs are seeing, which is they do some nice things. They are on a lot of plays, which is also just the description of being a linebacker. You're in on almost every single play. But he said, and I agree with him, if there was a cohesive unit around where, you plug and play Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter on the Philadelphia Eagles defense, perhaps, these guys are probably playing a lot better. But when you are relying on them to be your playmakers and not just being linebackers and play stoppers and, filling holes and all this stuff, it just all crumbles. It's like a house of cards. If there's no good base there, if there's nothing to build upon, if there's not a good foundation, the entire house is gonna crumble down. It's gonna just topple on top of each other. And it is funny because the entire offseason we heard Al Golden, we're not showing a whole lot on tape. And here they are 9 games into the year, and they're not showing a whole lot on tape. And it reminds me of watching, as sad as this is, it reminds me of watching a youth basketball game or a youth football game where if you've seen 6th graders play football and one of the teams just keeps running it into the back of the line, every single play for an entire 4 quarters, and then you talk to the coach, hey, why didn't you do something else? It's because we can't do that. We can't even do that well. What makes you think that we're going to go 5 wide and run it well? You see a youth basketball game, and they're just dribbling it around and not doing anything. You talk to the coach afterwards, they're like, hey, well, we can't even set screens for one another, so I don't know what you expect us to do. And that's where this defense is if they can't do the basic things at a competent level, what makes you think there's no hope to run anything advanced, to run anything at a high level? Just point blank, you can't get it done. You can't get it done. And here we go. We're going to go play the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers, who looks scared for his life in their most recent game, and the defense or the offense looks completely inept. And he'll go for a vintage Aaron Rodgers game of, throwing for 4 touchdowns, and he'll be absolutely fantastic because that's what we've seen before. But maybe we can outpace him because ever since Joe Flacco has been the starting quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, the Bengals do have the best offense in the league. And, expected EPA. So, I don't know. I guess it was depressing if I'm just being completely honest on where I'm at with this team. It was depressing when you want to be an optimistic person. Like, you want some sunshine in your days. You want to have the positive spin frequently. But sometimes it just doesn't call for it. Sometimes you just can't. And the only positive formation, the only thing that you can say about this Bengals team is that, or the Bengals defensive side of the football, is it just doesn't seem like it can get worse. But we've been wrong before, and we'll be wrong again. Stone, another thing that we didn't get a touch on, that we started breaking down yesterday, and I could tell you were getting you're a little fired up at things I was saying about Joe Burrow, the potential of Joe Burrow coming back. And obviously Jay Morrison said under 50% likelihood that he thinks, this is just his opinion, he thinks that Joe Burrow will be back for that Thanksgiving game. I think it's a whole different story if we win this Sunday, and even amazingly, if we win the next 2 games. I think it's a completely different story. But he said he's going to play regardless around December. And what does this look like if the Bengals are 3-8 or 3-9 and lose their next 3 games? To me, it doesn't have any positivity. There is not a single thing in my brain that makes sense for why you would do that. And I think Stone was if we had more time on the show yesterday, we were going to get into a rare disagreement between me and Stone yesterday. And I wanted to give you the floor to push back against me saying I don't think Joe Burrow should play if they fall to 3-9, 3-8.
I hear you, but that's just, in my opinion, not how it works. Again, I brought up this point previously in the week on the show. If the Bengals had the same record they have right now and Burrow had played the entire season, are they just going to, when they technically get close to eliminated from the playoffs or maybe officially get eliminated from playoff contention, they just say, all right, we'll sit you down, Joe? I mean, it doesn't work like that. Maybe you get to the final game of the year, the last game, and you're out of it. Then maybe you sit him down. But sit him down throughout the whole final stretch.
But there's nuance to this, though.
What is that nuance?
The nuance is that he is hurt, and he has a previous history of being hurt, so you don't want to put him in the position to get hurt again.
Right, but it's professional football, right? I mean, it's the most violent sport in the world, right? It happens, right? I don't... and it's his, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they need to rush him back. No. But if the doctors sit there and say he's good to go and the likelihood of him re-aggravating this is not high, then you go. I'm not suggesting they sit there and say, the doctors come up to the team and say, yeah, he's about 80%. Then you sit him down, right? If he's not close to 100% or just about 100% ready to go, then obviously you sit him down. But, I mean, it's professional football. That's just something we're going to have to deal with Joe Burrow throughout the rest of his career. And you know what? It stinks, but I'm willing to do it because he's such a great player, right? Every time he takes the field, you're going to hold your breath a little bit. Every time he gets hit, you're going to hold your breath a little bit. Every time it takes him maybe a split second longer to stand up after getting hit, you're going to hold your breath a little bit longer. That's just the reality of the situation with Joe Burrow. And it's unfortunate, but it's his job to go out there and play quarterback for this team. You can't just say, I'm done. The team's eliminated. No, it's your job to be the quarterback. You're getting paid to be the quarterback. Am I going to sit here and say, he owes it to the fan base? I'm not going to get carried away with it, but I think Joe would tell you the same thing, right? His job is to be the quarterback of this team through thick and thin, and he's getting paid handsomely to do it, handsomely to say the least. So if he's out there, or if he's available to be out there, I think he should be, and I think he will want to be.
He wants to be.
I think the coaches want him to be. Obviously, the organization.
Coaches need him to be.
Yeah, the coaches absolutely need him to be there as well. So I hear what you're saying, but it just doesn't. To me, it just doesn't work like that.
No, and that's why he's going to play. You are right about that. Like that, when you're a competitive person and your quarterback's ready to go, you play him. You just play him point blank. But I'm sitting here saying that there's nothing that makes sense logically in my brain for why you would play him. Nothing at all. Because objectively, if his team's 3-9, 3-8, season's done. Him coming back as an injury-prone quarterback, and you can say it's the most violent sport, and that almost feels like an argument for my case is, why I don't want my quarterback that has had injury problems in his career to go out there and play. I don't want him to put him in that position to potentially, once again, shorten his career for games that don't mean anything. And in fact, the things that do mean something, they do mean a little bit, and that is that we would prefer to lose them over the course of the future of our franchise. It looks better. It's better for the future of our franchise if we do not win those games. This is why we have this conversation about why tanking's a thing. Because we want to have earlier picks in the draft. And the only argument that you have on why he should play, other than the fact it's just what you do, which is a bad place to always argue from. Oh, that's the way it's always been. Your quarterback's healthy. The only reason that he should play is, one, that the coaches need to win games to probably keep their job, because 3-14 and they're probably gone, which I would also argue maybe that's a good thing. Two, he's a $55 million a year investment. So when you have an investment like that, season ticket holders, you want to put butts in the seats. So creates a little more money for the organization. But that's it, man. That's really it. There's nothing competitively wise for the future outlook of this franchise that would make sense for him to play. You put him in a position to get hurt once again, and on top of that, you put yourself in better chances to win games when really the object should be losing games. It's a loser position to be in, but at this point they'd be losers. So that's where you fight from. All right. Talked about the Reds. Talked about the Bengals. It's now time. We didn't do this yesterday because we had Paul Fritchner and Jay Morrison on the show. But as always, every week we will do a mailbag because your guys' questions, all the viewers, all the listeners, everyone that watches this show, they just fill up our DMs, fill up our emails with all of these questions. So without further ado, Stone, let's get into this week's mailbag.
All right, here we go. Favorite segment of the week, right?
That's right.
Mailbag here at Off the Bench. Dear Off the Bench. There have been some speculation that the New York Giants will hire Bill Belichick to be their next head coach. That seems wild to me and not the happy ending we all had hoped for. What do you think of this rumor? And that comes in from Bob Kraft.
Oh, the owner
of the Patriots.
And he knows a thing or two about happy endings. So.
You could make that argument.
Yeah. Listen, this has been reported now for about a day. And it's wild that in this world of constant bickering and constant arguing, especially in the sports world where almost all of the media is that right there, is people sitting up, here's a topic, all right, let's argue. Let's get after it. This thing comes out. Bill Belichick, the greatest football coach currently in the history of the National Football League. No one's won more championships than him. He's the GOAT, as they say. And where did he get his career? Where did he first really start making his name? Well, it's the DC of the New York Giants when Bill Parcells was there. Lawrence Taylor was there. And then obviously we've heard through the grapevine that Bill Belichick has a lot of reverence for the New York Giants because of his formative years there. But point blank, I mean, this doesn't make any sense here. Bill Belichick, to say he lost his fastball would be a massive understatement. To say that he's the same coach that led the Patriots for 2 decades, this hyper-focused, hyper-aggressive, competitive coach, it doesn't even seem like that anymore. It seems like he is okay gallivanting around with, and I hate to say this, hate to bring this up, his 24-year-old girlfriend, which, shout out to him at 73 years old for bagging a 24-year-old girlfriend. But there's just way too much noise, and there's nothing this decade that makes you think that Bill Belichick is still a great coach. So why at age 73 would the New York Giants, the New York football Giants, bring in Bill Belichick with all of the noise, everything around him, just to, make a circus of their organization, a very proud organization at that? This is, 1, it's not going to happen. 2, it doesn't make any sense just because of all the noise circling. 3 years ago, before the Jordan Hudsons of the world came out, and before the end of the New England Patriots, and before everything that's going down in North Carolina that is an absolute disaster, and the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast come out, and the stories reported that he's not letting in scouts from the New England Patriots because he's scorned about how that all ended. Before all that news came out 3 years ago, I'd say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, why wouldn't the New York Giants do this? The Patriots clearly have lost their way, and they could go in a new direction, and Bill Belichick can continue to go after the most wins of all time and, continue to cement his legacy in a place that helped him build his reputation. But now, here in the year of our Lord 2025, with everything that's happened over the past year regarding Bill Belichick, it's not happening. It's just point blank not happening. Stone, your opinion on this?
Yeah, he kind of dug his own grave here, right? I mean, if you're the NFL, you have to – it's a very serious league, right? You can't be doing this, right? And you could sit here and say, well, he's free to do whatever he wants. It's perfectly legal or whatever. That's fine. But that's not the image that any one of these teams are going to want to have. That will constantly be a distraction. I'm, of course, talking about his girlfriend. But even beyond that, what has he done to show you that you would want him to come back and be a head coach? I get that it was a risk to go to Carolina and take the job, and I'm not going to knock him for the lack of success he's had at Carolina. But just, how he treated the media throughout the whole process there in New England. Fine, you can do whatever you want when you're winning, but when things got ugly, he was out quickly, right? So, and that's just kind of how things work there. I think there's a very tired narrative around him right now. I don't know if that style works anymore. Obviously, he has connections with the Giants, and maybe they'll give him an interview. Maybe they'll explore it. To be very clear, Bill Belichick, I know he's danced around the questions right now at Carolina, and rightfully so, but he would do anything to have the Giants' job. And he has a lot of love and admiration for that organization. Obviously was there for a long time, won a championship there as the DC. So he definitely wants to be there, but I just think at this stage of his life and his career, what he's got going on, there's so many better candidates out there.
You touched on this with Brian Kelly a few weeks ago, and I liked your take on the Stone Shield show about Brian Kelly. And when you treat people poorly over the course of your life, and they're okay being treated poorly as long as everything's churning out and winning. And Bill Belichick, from every book that's come out about the Patriots dynasty, from every report and every way that we see him talk to the media on any given Sunday, you see he kind of treats people like dog doo-doo. And when things are winning, everyone's okay with it because that's just the way it is. He's a tormented genius. But when you start losing, you got no friends anymore. And when you're in the position that Bill Belichick, who clearly still wants to coach and wants to go after the all-time wins record and all these things that he still wants to establish in his career, you need friends. And he's pretty much torched every friend that he's ever had in this business. Or they're old. They're out of this league now. Next mailbag.
OTB, there seems to be more and more rumors that the end of the Matt LaFleur era in Green Bay is coming quickly. Do you believe this has any legs or just a frustrated fan base? And that comes in from Jeff Halfley.
Oh, the DC.
Yeah, I get why he would be interested in that.
Yeah, I get why he'd be interested in that too. Yeah, so me and Stone have actually talked about this off air a few times because different podcasts that we listen to, they talk about this topic quite a bit, actually. And that is, and it's the reason we talked about this off air is because it it's hard to see how this happens, which is the Green Bay Packers firing Matt LaFleur, who coming into the year, if there was a fantasy draft of head coaches in the NFL, I don't think it'd be a hard thing to say that he'd be probably near the top 5 head coaches selected. Like, coming into the year, undoubtedly would be certainly top 10, but he'd be a top 5. He'd be right around there of the top 5 guys that you take. And here they are. They've had this nucleus. They've had this core for years, and they bring in Micah Parsons, and it seems like it's time to win now, right? To do something big. And they just haven't been able this season. And we're 10 weeks into the season. So, like, that's both a lot of time into the season, but also not a lot of time for these guys to get together. It feels like they haven't taken that next step into, like, being a true dominant force in the NFC, which I would argue who has, other than the Seahawks, the Rams. Like, it's not really a dominant season in the NFL this year. I can't see why the Green Bay Packers would get rid of Matt LaFleur. And in fact, I just don't think they will. And part of the reason that this has circulated isn't just because they've had some weird losses, they've had some weird performances this year. Part of it is because Jeff Hafley has done such a fantastic job. In their 3 losses, I think they've given up like an average 13 points or something like that, 16 points. So Matt LaFleur is this offensive mind, and he can't, with all these weapons, get them to score enough points in those games. So that's the reason why this is coming, because it feels like a guy like Jeff Hafley, who's had success as a head coach, who's had success as a DC, and certainly wants to be a head coach in the NFL. It feels like this is a chance to replace Matt LaFleur, move Jeff Hafley up to the head coach, and then you bring in some smart OC. But I just, let me put it this way. I've said this before. I'll say it again here. A good way to gauge where you're at is, if I make this move, what's the fallout? To predict the fallout. If the Bengals get rid of Zach Taylor, is Zach Taylor going to get a job right away? Is there going to be some long line at the door of Zach Taylor's house trying to convince him to be their head coach? Of course not. If Matt LaFleur gets fired as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, he will have a new job within the week. He would, because he deserves one, and he's one of the better coaches in the league. Stone, we've talked about this a lot off air, but it just, I can't see this happening, point blank.
I can't either, and I don't think it will. A lot of people are talking about it. I get it's the Packers, right? It's a really proud fan base and franchise, and all they do is win for all of my life, and even before that, there as well. And to completely agree, if they moved on from Matt LaFleur, Giants immediately calling, Titans immediately calling, right? He would have a job as a head coach in the NFL next year if he were to get moved off of. And I kind of had this same stance with Zach Taylor. Yeah, I know the Bengals, you could argue, didn't fully go all the way in, but for Bengals standards, they're paying 2 weapons in their quarterback, and they paid their edge rusher this year. They kind of went all in, and I just don't think after you do that, you blow it up. Well, the Packers definitely went all in. They just traded for Micah Parsons and gave up multiple first-round picks. So to sit here and blow it up or get a new coach in there after 1 year, to me, doesn't make much sense. But, their struggles offensively are real. And, they paid their quarterback, Jordan Love. I've always been a big believer in Jordan Love. He's made some mistakes. The offense looks clunky. At times they've struggled to run the ball, and they got kind of just a receivers by committee room. They don't really have a star that can pop out and be that guy, and I think they're definitely hurting after the Tucker Kraft injury. But I've got belief in Matt LaFleur. Aaron Rodgers doesn't win those 2 MVPs without Matt LaFleur. We don't talk about Jordan Love as a guy that can be a real true franchise quarterback, I don't think, without Matt LaFleur. So he's done a lot of good things. I get it. It's Green Bay. They expect to win. His playoff record isn't the best. So maybe we can revisit this later if they somehow miss the playoffs or maybe are one and done in the playoffs. We can reevaluate, but I don't think people in the NFL, and I don't know this for certain, but I doubt people in the NFL actually think there's a chance he gets fired, and they're going to be laughing if he does, because there's going to be a bunch of teams that want his ability, his resources, and for him to come coach.
And it's worth mentioning that the Packers have made moves before where they've been laughed at, a la, drafting Aaron Rodgers at the end of the Brett Favre, drafting Jordan Love at the end of the Aaron Rodgers. Like, they've made moves where they've seemingly, set up for the future, did something that not many teams in the NFL would do. So this wouldn't be a complete surprise from that organization, because they do seem to be a more aggressive or a proactive and not a reactive organization. But I do think that there's a very, very, very slim, regardless of how much noise, and there seems to be more and more of the by the day on this topic, regardless of how much noise, it's a very, very slim chance that Matt LaFleur is out of a job. And the only way I can see it happening is things would have to kind of go off the rails. And I just don't, even if they make the postseason and get mollywopped in their first game, which we've seen over the past few years in that wild card round, even if that happened, I don't see them getting rid of Matt LaFleur. Like, it would genuinely have to be where they miss out on the postseason. Like, that'd be the only way to where I'd really take some credence to these rumors. And I'll say this. Jeff Hafley clearly has been successful as a head coach at Boston College and is a great DC in that Green Bay Packers team. But, like, there's not many options here. Like, I guess what I'm saying is the old cliche of one in the hand's worth two in the bush. You know, with Matt LaFleur, you can have great teams. You can have teams that can get the number one seed in the NFC. You have teams that can win the NFC North. You have teams that can win multiple postseason games with Jordan Love as their quarterback. So, like, you don't know what you're going to have with Jeff Hafley, and he's going to be a coach at some point in this league, but I don't know. It just seems like a really weird situation. From, like I said when I started this rant, if you, before this season, did a fantasy draft of all 32 head coaches, and you're like, all right, who's number one? Oh, I'll take Andy Reid. I'll take Sean McVay. I'll take Jim Harbaugh. You'd get to about pick 5 before you go, all right, should we take Matt LaFleur? Let's take Matt LaFleur. That's around where he thought of before the season started. Stone, next mailbag.
All right, here we go. Stone and I guess Reed. With the 2024 quarterback class continuing to emerge, it has me wondering, which QB class do you think is better, the 2020 class or the 2024 class? And that comes in from Kenny Pickett.
Ooh, he's worried. He was the prize of his draft class. Yeah. Kenny Pickett, great quarterback. This is a good question because we're getting to the point where it's pretty clear that 2024 draft class looks really good. Looks really good. To where Drake May, the 3rd overall pick, he's a legitimate candidate to win the Most Valuable Player award. We had Jaden Daniels last year, and he's been hurt this year, and the Commanders have had some success or had some struggles this year. But he had one of the best rookie seasons that we've ever seen from a quarterback. Oh, yeah, and Caleb Williams is kind of emerging as a star in this league. Like, maybe not to the point that we thought and not as quickly as we thought because he was touted as maybe the best prospect we've seen since Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck, whatever the thing you want to do is. But those guys, Michael Penix has shown times where he's been okay, but he's not very good. J.J. McCarthy leaves a lot to be desired. But then Bo Nix. Bo Nix is 8-2. Coming at the end of that first round. This is a really, really good draft class. And then what about the 2020 draft class? That's guys like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, who have all been successful in this league. Jalen Hurts was in that class, right?
And Jordan
Love. I'm giving, if you're asking me right now, to project which class will be better at the end of their career, we'll go like, oh man, that 2024 class was better than that 2020 class. I'm sticking with the 2020 class at this moment because we've seen Jalen Hurts win a Super Bowl, and we've seen Jordan Love win playoff games, and we've seen Joe Burrow beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason, and Justin Herbert, who's running out of excuses on why he hasn't blossomed into a star, though he's really, really good. Tua Tagovailoa, with all of his deficiencies in a terrible system, like he's had some success. I'll go with 2020 at this point over 2024, but it would not surprise me at all if we're even in 2-3 years going like, okay, the 2024 class is better. Stone?
I think to me it's clearly the 2020 class.
Okay.
Burrow, Herbert, Tua, Hurts, Love are the guys in the 2020 class. When we talk about Burrow and Herbert, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say like they could be two of the best quarterbacks ever. Like I think that are they going to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning? I don't know, but they could be like literally, no doubt, Hall of Fame guys. Burrow and Herbert, I think, can be, and then Hurts. his two best games of his career have come in something called the Super Bowl, and he won the second one, right? I'm obviously a little bit higher on Jordan Love than everybody else, but he's got all the traits. He can make all the throws. And I look at the 24 class, and a lot were taken in the first round, and a lot of them are being asked to, obviously play right now. I agree. I've never been a big Caleb Williams guy, but you can't deny that he's gotten better as the season's gone on, and clearly him and Ben Johnson, it's working out. They're winning games.
Right.
Hat off. Tip my hat to that. Daniels had a sensational year last year. Has the injuries. I think the injuries, unfortunately, I hope this isn't true, obviously, but are going to become kind of a reoccurring theme for him throughout his career. And May, I think, is the best one. And then beyond that, I think Michael Penix, I got some questions how long he'll be the guy in Atlanta. I've been out on J.J. McCarthy since the beginning. And Bo Nix I was in on, but he's regressing. It's
right. They're still 8-2.
Regressing. And I just think the star power in the 2020 class is well beyond what the 24 class will ever be, even if Caleb Williams ends up being really good. I just think, you got Herbert and Burrow in there. Those are two dudes right there. And then Jalen Hurts wasn't even in the first round. And for whatever reason, he gets disrespected so much, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League. So to me, clearly, it's 2020.
It's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning that 2020 class didn't emerge until the end of their sophomore season. Herbert was really good as a rookie. He played the entire season. Burrow was really good as a rookie, but obviously he got hurt. It didn't really blossom until Joe Burrow takes the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl in year 2. So let's just pump the brakes and see what's going on, because we can talk about that 2020 class, but Drake May might win the MVP this year, and we've yet to see a guy from the 2020 class win the MVP. We saw a great first year with Justin Herbert. Well, we saw a great first year from Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels' year last year was better than Justin Herbert's rookie season. Drake May's having a great sophomore season where he's actually being thought of and is the leading betting favorite for the MVP. Joe Burrow had a great sophomore season, but he wasn't considered for the MVP, really. What came in third place? That Bengals team, they came on late and had a miraculous run, but they weren't what the New England Patriots are. We didn't see Jordan Love play until year 3? His rookie's first season was 2023. Tua was okay, but I think that a Tua comparison to a guy Bo Nix, I don't know. Bo Nix is 8-2 this year. I'm just saying, yes, you're giving it to 2020 because there's more establishment, right? We've seen now for 5 years that Joe Burrow looks unbelievable. We've seen Jalen Hurts win a Super Bowl. We've seen Justin Herbert continue to develop and look like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But just don't be surprised if in 2 years it's guys like Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels that are taking the throne as the best quarterbacks in this league. Just don't be surprised if that happens. So I'll give it to 2020 right now, but will absolutely not be surprised if by the end of 2027 we have a completely different look on this thing, because Drake May's rattled off an MVP and Caleb Williams has been to a Super Bowl and won the NFC, and Bo Nix continues to win the AFC West over guys like Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. So we'll continue to see. Mailbag.
All right. Thanks, Kenny, for that question. Next question comes in from Jalen Hurts, of all people. Eagles don't look like themselves offensively, and A.J. Brown continues to be a headache for the team and the media. What do you make of the Eagles' offense this year, and do you think this is the end of A.J. Brown in Philly?
I've been thinking a lot about the Eagles, and clearly something's wrong there offensively. No doubt about it. Saquon Barkley doesn't look the same. Their offense doesn't look the same. All that stuff. Yes, they don't look the same. They're still winning games, right? And they've got. I'm pulling up their record right now, but they have probably some of the more impressive wins in the NFL this season. Am I crazy for thinking that? They're 7-2, and they've beaten the Chiefs, they've beaten the Rams, they've beaten the Buccaneers, and they've beaten the Packers. Who are the best teams in the NFC that we can? Seahawks, sure, but it's the Rams and the Packers. And there was a while where a lot of people were putting the Chiefs as the number one team in the entire NFL. So they've got some serious wins. They've had 2 bad losses, and it came against the New York Giants, which kind of inexplicable, and a random fourth quarter win from Bo Nix and a surge from the Denver Broncos, who are 8-2, so that's not a bad loss either. Clearly, they don't look the same, but I'm not worried about the Philadelphia. In fact, if I was a betting man, they're probably the betting favorites to win the NFC, and that feels like a pretty good bet because I think they'll at least be playing in the NFC. But yeah, it's pretty clear that AJ Brown, that this is the end. This is the last year of that. He's just too much noise, man. Too much noise everywhere he's been. Just too much noise. You can't continue to do that. It's the same thing that we talked about earlier, where when you're playing great, we can put up with you being a problem, but if we don't need you, we don't need you, and we're not putting up with the headache. AJ Brown in Philly, you think it's done?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I think if you said the Eagles repeat as Super Bowl champions, I'd be like, okay, that wouldn't really surprise me. If they're going to go on another run like that, they're going to need AJ Brown at some point. They're not throwing him the ball, which is kind of interesting because I think A.J. Brown, you talk about the best receivers in the league. I'm not saying he's Jamar Chase or, Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb, but he's up there. He's a really good player, and I think that's why he's so frustrated. But the Eagles are finding ways to win games without him. And, Jalen Hurts, his go-to guy has been Devontae Smith, and Smitty's great. I don't know if I necessarily blame him there. So it's gotten loud, obviously, when you're going on stream or whatever and saying, like, drop me in fantasy or whatever the heck he's saying. That's ridiculous, right? You just won a Super Bowl and you're on a really good team. And you're getting paid a lot of money, by the way, as well. So it's just – I don't understand why you would act like that. But, yeah, Roseman will trade him this offseason. They'll get some draft picks back, and they'll keep the whole thing running. But, obviously, Philly's identity is not necessarily throwing the ball down the field. It's, we're going to line up, we're going to block, we're going to run the football, we're going to tush push, we're going to get it to Smitty, we're going to, use our quarterback's legs from time to time there as well. We're going to play good defense. So, he just isn't necessarily a perfect fit. But then again, he won a world title last year, and I don't think anybody would be surprised if he did it again this year. But pretty clear to me that Roseman will trade him this offseason.
Yep. I'm with you 100%. Stone, we won't get into the final mailbag because we have run out of time. Man, that takes up a lot of time here today. But thank you so much, as always, for producing. Hope you have a great show here in the 11 o'clock hour. Thanks for doing a lot of heavy lifting, as always. And I'll see you guys tomorrow, final show of the week. Bengals getting ready to play Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bearcats getting ready to play the Arizona Cardinals. A lot of good stuff going on here in Cincinnati. We'll see you tomorrow here on Off the Bench. I'm Reed Stone Shields. See ya.
Here we are on a Thursday. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here at the Stone Shield Show. Appreciate everybody hanging out through off the bench into our show. Hour number 2 here at Chatterbox Sports. Got lots to talk about here on a Thursday. Obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals, they will play on Sunday in Pittsburgh against the Pittsburgh Steelers as they look to get their 4th win of the year and improve to, guess what? Yep, potentially 3-0 in the AFC North. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. Gabby Sorrentino of Fox 19 will stop by, sports reporter for Fox 19, works with Joe Daneman and, of course, Jeremy Rowell over there. Looking forward to getting her on the show and asking her some questions about kind of the state of the Bengals, obviously the Joe Burrow news, some Trey Hendrickson stuff, and obviously the game against Pittsburgh on Sunday. So looking forward to that conversation. That's coming up in about 10 minutes here at the show. Also, before that, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the Bengals rookies. Paul Dehner Jr. wrote a piece yesterday for The Athletic. We were going to talk about it on yesterday's show, but I got pushed to today, just kind of breaking down all 6 picks, where everybody's at. And unfortunately, I don't think the Bengals have seen the necessary growth from those guys to this point. And, you know, in fairness to some of those players, they've been asked to do a lot, and clearly they haven't been able to handle it necessarily to the best of their ability here at this point. And unfortunately, it's leading to a lot of losses for the Bengals. Brian Daboll, of course, was fired by the New York Giants. Had my thoughts on that. That's up on the channel if you haven't checked that out already. Kind of just, okay, you want to fire the coach, that's one thing, but you want to keep the GM. That's kind of gotten them into this mess. Doesn't really make much sense to me. We'll go through a bunch of Daboll replacements. You know, it's the Giants. It's New York. Young quarterback on a rookie deal that's shown a lot of promise. I think it's a very top-of-the-line job. I think it's going to be a very highly coveted job. And, yeah, it better be a long search for New York as they try to find the best potential replacements for Brian Daboll. Obviously, they can talk to people that aren't currently employed, i.e. Mike McCarthy. But any, you know, coordinators or assistant coaches or head coaches elsewhere, obviously that cannot happen until the season is over. So we'll roll through some of those replacements here on the show. Also talked about this a little on Off the Bench. A.J. Brown continues to be an issue for Philadelphia. He's going on streams, going on Twitch or whatever, playing video games, saying you need to drop me from your fantasy team. And it's crazy. You know, it's one thing if you're saying that and you're playing for the Titans, right, or the Jets, right, but you're playing for the team that just won the Super Bowl. You're technically their wide receiver 1, and they're paying you a ton of money. I understand you're not getting the football as much as you would like, but it's really hard for me to understand why he is acting the way he is. So we'll talk a little bit about A.J. Brown. Feels like only a matter of time this offseason before they ultimately move off him. And Paul Skeens wins the Cy Young. That shouldn't have surprised anyone. I absolutely love Paul Skeens. Obviously, he's a Pirate. He's in the Reds division. That's not ideal. They're going to see him for a long time, but just an incredible talent, Paul Skeens. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of today's show. Gabby Sorrentino in about 10 minutes, but let's start with this kind of synopsis and where we're at here with the Bengals rookies here at this point. Obviously, there were 6 picks for the Bengals in this past year's draft, and we said going into the draft, when you pay Joe Burrow, when you pay T. Higgins, when you pay Jamar Chase, and ultimately later on ended up giving the raise to Trey Hendrickson, didn't give him the long-term deal, but you paid him as well, at least for 1 year. And when that happens, regardless of where you're at in the National Football League, if you're paying 2 receivers, which obviously is, you know, pretty uncommon, I would say, in the NFL, and a lot of pundits were banging on the Bengals saying, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a recipe for winning. At this point, unfortunately, it looks like they're kind of right? Because you're not winning. Jamar and T are balling. Defense still stinks. Right? But the bottom line is when you pay 3 guys like that, top-of-the-line money, and you can throw Hendrickson into the mix there as well with his 1-year raise here for the Bengals, you have to hit on your draft picks. And you only had 6 of them. It's not like you had 9 picks and lots of opportunities. With the 6 picks, you needed to really hit on at least 3 of them. And one you definitely needed to hit on was the first-round pick in Shamar Stewart. And obviously, that hasn't worked out the way we certainly were hoping for at this point for the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously, you watch the game, you use your eyeballs, and the eyes tell you that it ain't good for Shamar Stewart, right? That, him getting pancaked in the Bear game, I mean, the whole point of taking Shamar Stewart is that he's this freaky athlete that's a physical beast and, you know, is going to be able to rush the quarterback and be really physical and be solid in the run game. I mean, the block that guy, I think it was Darnell Wright of the Chicago Bears, put, I mean, just full pancake job, blasted him over like 4 gaps over and knocked out one of his teammates there in the process there as well. Just, and Whitworth was talking about this on his podcast, like that is going to be on, you know, Darnell Wright's highlight tape throughout his entire career. Like, that's just a grown man move on a guy that's supposed to be a tough physical beast of a presence for you. And of course, Shamar Stewart on that obviously has not panned out. But Stewart, he ranks 16th out of 16 qualifying rookie edge rushers in overall PFF grade, 15th in true pass set win percentage, and one of the 2 players without a hit or a sack on a QB this year. And a lot of us, we sat there and you looked at his stats in college and you said, yeah, that was really cool what he did at the combine. He was moving pretty fast. He looks pretty strong. He's kind of a beast, right? But you sat there and you looked at his production in the SEC and you said, what did he do? What, do you have 4.5 sacks throughout his entire college career? How is that going to magically turn into sacks and production and quarterback hits here in the National Football League? Obviously, it did not, or at least through a couple of weeks. And there's some people out there that say, give him some time. He had the ankle injury. Maybe that's still something that's bothering him. By the way, he's got the knee right now. He's day-to-day, but there's a lot of people out there that don't anticipate him playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe he's officially been ruled out, but I haven't seen anything about that yet with Shamar Stewart. But the bottom line is you couldn't afford to take somebody that was going to be a bit of a project. And you hear Al Golden talk about him, and he says, the quote was infant stages with Shamar Stewart. You couldn't afford to do that at this point. Your defense was bad last year. You needed a guy to come in and really be a force for you and really be a capable starter and somebody that you could count on. Look at Malachi Starks in Baltimore. He's playing really, really solid. Look at Jahad Campbell in Philadelphia. He's sensational. Both of those guys you could have had. Both of those guys would immediately elevate your defense. We said that. A lot of people said that. Right? Instead, you took the guy that was a project and just hoped that he would turn into a great NFL player immediately. Obviously, that hasn't happened. And you couple it with him not showing up for much of the offseason workouts because he's in a contract dispute, and it's pretty ugly on the playing field for Shamar Stewart. You're holding on to a little bit of hope. I know maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. Obviously, there's some frustration with the fact he hasn't done anything and the fact that he was drama this offseason and, he hasn't always said the right things when he's had a microphone in front of him. I understand that. But maybe there's hope for him in 2026. But this year here in 2025, I don't think there's really any reason to be optimistic that he can help this team playing winning football. And remember, they were talking about, he's getting a lot of mental reps, right? Remember, he was holding out, and not many people talking about the mental reps now because clearly that didn't do enough, and clearly it's not working on the football field. It's not that, I think the physical stuff, right? I mean, he's huge and he's a great athlete. Like, that should work itself out at some point. And that's kind of what Al Golden, I'm sure Zach Taylor is kind of leaning on. But when you couple it with not knowing where you're supposed to go, not trusting what you're seeing, it results in a lot of ugly play. And unfortunately, that's what the Bengals have gotten from Shamar Stewart here. If there's one thing, again, they might be without him for several weeks, but if there's one thing to potentially try with him, and Al Golden's kind of started to do it a little bit more, with Shamar Stewart is kind of just line him up in different spots. Early on, it was basically, we're going to line him up over the tackle, and he's going to rush the passer from the edge. You're starting to see him get moved around a little bit more. I think that could be beneficial for him, and if there's one thing to try here going forward with Shamar Stewart is just to move him around a little bit more. And you talk about, the season, could it be technically over in a couple of weeks? Yeah, maybe. But when Shamar is ready to come back and be healthy, he's got to be out there, and he's got to be out there for a lot of snaps. Because I'm out on Shamar Stewart, but the Bengals aren't going to be out on him in 2026. They just can't afford to do that. They can't quit on him this early. He's going to be a guy that gets a lot of playing time next year, and for the sake of the Bengals, he has to figure it out, and he has to improve upon what he's doing right now. And then you get to the next level, of course, of the defense, and it's those linebackers. And, linebacker in the NFL, linebacker at any level of football is just such an important position to play. And when you put 2 rookies out there and then you put them behind a bad defensive line, you're kind of setting them up for failure. And unfortunately, Demetrius Knight, he needed to be a guy similar to Shamar Stewart that came in here and was ready to play immediately. And the Bengals kind of expected him to be that guy. He's played a ton of college football. He's a mature guy. He was a captain. He's been around. He's married. He's got a kid. We trust this guy out there. And he said all the right things, and he's done all the right things from a work ethic perspective. But is he playing great football? No. And then you pair him with Barrett Carter. Again, he was a 4th-round pick, so you can't really expect as much from him. Right? And again, all the leadership stuff is there. He was a captain at Clemson. He wore the green dot. He says the right things. He's taking accountability. That's all great, and that's stuff you can build off of. But unfortunately, the Bengals need a lot more than that right now. We don't just need him to be a good teammate and a good leader. We need him to be a really, really good player. And unfortunately for him, he doesn't have that guy that he could lean on because his running mate is a fellow rookie. And that's where things get, very, very complicated. And that's when you start to question the Logan Wilson move maybe a little bit. And we'll definitely talk with Gabby about the Logan Wilson trade, right? Because I think now it's like, well, you got these 2 rookie guys that you're sending out there for the majority of the snaps. Who's going to, coach them up? Logan Wilson's gone. Who can be that veteran presence that they can lean on and ultimately try to get a little bit better? Don't have that with these 2 guys anymore. And some of the stats kind of jump out you with these 2 guys. I think at the end of the day, the linebackers are kind of the root of your problems, right? Because linebackers is such an important position. You're constantly getting in collisions every single play, right? I mean, there's a reason why the linebackers always have the most tackles, right? Because they're always there at the point of attack with an opportunity to make a play. And, you've seen some good stuff from Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, but unfortunately, you haven't seen enough. And that's caused, a lot of issues for you on defense. I think the biggest thing with Demetrius Knight is he's just a little bit too hesitant right now when he's playing, and there's some clips kind of circulating on social media that kind of illustrate that. But in this league, you can't afford to be, a half a step late reacting, right? It's the NFL. They're going to make you pay. And you kind of saw that remember that end around as Zacchaeus in the Chicago Bear game a couple of weeks ago, and he just was a split second late getting to the boundary, and at that point, Zacchaeus is around the corner and he's into the end zone for a touchdown. Can't have that in the NFL. Hopefully, that's something that as he plays more, he can iron that out because, he's made some plays out there defensively. And then Barrett Carter has had some missed tackles, right? There's clips of him where it's like, okay, he's in the right spot, which is good, but then he can't get the guy on the ground. In this league, in the NFL, if your linebackers are missing tackles, you're in deep trouble because then they get to the third level of that defense, and then that's already, 10 yards at that point, and things can get really hairy for you. So if your linebackers are missing tackles, that obviously is a serious, serious issue, and they're missing a ton. These 2 guys are missing a ton. There are 6 rookie linebackers with at least 300 snaps this year. Only 2 have a missed tackle rate higher than 9.4%, and those 2 linebackers are Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter at 15.3% and 15.4%. Respectively. So, hopefully the hesitancy, they can clean that up a little bit more, play a little bit quicker. And, as they grow, they'll continue to understand how to play the position a little bit better. And you're hoping that they continue to get better as the season goes on and they can kind of work out some of those kinks as linebackers because they're going to be guys that you rely on, right, at that linebacker spot with Barrett Carter and, of course, Demetrius Knight Jr. And then we'll talk about the offensive line a little bit there as well. I think those guys, there's some optimism that things are trending in the right direction because you remember at the beginning of the year, obviously everyone was talking about the defense and how bad the defense was, but also it was the offensive line, too, that wasn't necessarily playing at a very high level. Well, that talk has kind of simmered down a little bit, and all of a sudden you got 2 rookies out there playing, and Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers, and now you sit there and you go, okay, maybe we can build around these guys. Maybe these guys can be, cornerstones of your offensive line for years going forward. And, of course, you have some veterans there that you question. Orlando Brown Jr., what's his future going to look like? He certainly has struggled. And Ted Karras, who we all love, but he's potentially getting a little bit long in the tooth there as well. But I think the offensive line and those 2 picks is something that should intrigue a lot of people going forward. And then the final pick, of course, in the 6th round was Taj Brooks, and we haven't really seen much from him yet because the Bengals, of course, have Chase Brown, and, of course, they have Samaje Perine, and he really hasn't been asked to do much. But Perine probably going to miss some time here, and he's going to have an opportunity out of Texas Tech to see what he can do. And we've seen some guys in the back end of that draft at the running back position at other places across the league. Obviously, Kyle Monangai in Chicago that's had a lot of success to this point, and we're all going to start to find out really what Taj Brooks can offer at that running back spot and if he potentially can be a guy going forward to be kind of that second back behind Chase Brown. All right, our guest is ready to join us here on the show, and we certainly appreciate Gabby Sorrentino for making some time with us here at the show. Gabby Sorrentino, a sports reporter for Fox 19. Gabby, how's it going? Thanks for making some time for us.
Yeah, of course. This is great. I love your setup. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Lots to talk about. Could go a lot of different ways here with the Bengals, but I want to start, of course, with the news of the week, and that, of course, is Joe Burrow returning to practice. I think a lot of us, we expected it to happen at some point this year, but maybe not as early as it did. And I know when I got the report and I saw it come across the line, like, oh, Burrow's coming back to practice, I definitely was like, oh, here we go. This is a little bit earlier than expected. What was your immediate reaction to that news?
Yeah, I think you and everybody else. I'm off on Monday and Tuesdays, so I'm not around. I try and kind of disconnect. But, of course, the ESPN notification came through, and I was like, wait, what? I couldn't believe it. Genuinely, I know that he had been around the facility, and we had seen him on the sidelines of games throwing balls, and he wasn't in a boot, so it felt like it was coming at some point. But, yeah, genuinely, I was surprised, and just seeing Joe Burrow back out there with the team, practicing. It feels good. It feels like something that Bengals fans need right now. And, in his press conference, we all heard him keep the door open for a return. There's been dates thrown out there. But I think just having him out there practicing has been huge for this team.
There's been a lot of discourse over the past few days from the fan base and certainly people that cover the team there as well. Half the side is like, well, if they lose these next 2 games, which, unfortunately is a real possibility, maybe we don't want to see Joe Burrow again if the Bengals are, close to being eliminated from the playoffs. And there's other people, and we had Jay Morrison on yesterday, and he was like, no, he needs to play, and he should play, and he's going to play regardless of what the record looks like as long as he is healthy. What's kind of your take on that? If the Bengals, continue to lose some games, do you still want to see him out there, or do you think they should kind of just shut him down and we'll see him in 2026?
I think knowing the athlete and the person that Joe Burrow is, he wants to be out there.
Right.
I think that he doesn't care what the team's record is. I genuinely think that if he is healthy, 100% healthy, and is ready to go, he's going to be out there. I just think that's the kind of person that he is. That's the kind of player that he is. I understand that people are saying, okay, well, if, it's tank time and the team isn't doing well, then why should he be out there? But why shouldn't he be out there? Because he is the team's quarterback, and it's still good for him to be out there. It's still good for him to be out there with the team. So I think that he's going to return at some point. I don't know when that is. Obviously, he hasn't really been doing much, but I definitely think that we're going to see Joe Burrow out there this season.
Yeah, I totally agree as it relates to that. Some storylines have kind of gotten buried here this week with Burrow coming back to practice, and one of which is Joe Flacco. He didn't throw yesterday. We kind of saw this same pattern leading into the Bear game. He's expected to throw today. Do you have any updates on his health, on that shoulder, and just your general takeaways from his time here in Cincinnati? Because he's played great football in place of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, well, first off, I grew up in Baltimore, so seeing Joe Flacco walk around the Bengals locker room has been so unreal for me. I grew up, watching him in Baltimore, of course. So it's been a really cool thing for me. He will be throwing today at practice, which is just in a few hours. So I think we are going to expect him to be a full go at practice today. They might still say he's limited, but I think he's fine. I think they're just managing that shoulder, with his age. He is 40. So right. He deserves some days off, I think. He did a 25-minute press conference yesterday. That's something you just don't really see much in the NFL. So I think that really goes to show what kind of person Joe Flacco is. He's so happy to be here. While he was talking, I was in the locker room talking with guys. I spoke with Andre Yosivas, and we talked a little bit about Joe Burrow being back out there. But we also talked about, that this team still has all the trust in Joe Flacco. So, yes, it's great for them to see Joe Burrow out there. But the team is ready with Joe Flacco. And I think that that's really important and really cool to see kind of the support that he has. I'm not too worried about the shoulder. I just think they're managing it throughout the week. But it's been really cool to see kind of the guys rally around him. And, yes, Joe Burrow's out there, but Joe Flacco's our guy right now.
And the other thing that's kind of going under the radar a little bit is the Trey Hendrickson injury. Obviously, you had the bye, and a lot of people were hoping that, maybe with that time off, he'd be able to come back and be ready to go for the Pittsburgh game. But Zach Taylor said early in the week that he is doubtful. I think that despite how bad the defense has been, if he was out there against the Jets or the Bears, I think he'd probably win at least one of those games just because he's such a closer at that edge rusher spot. What's the latest on him? Do you think he will come back at some point? And how big of a loss has it been for Cincinnati over the course of these past few games?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that, Stone, because we have a weekly show called Bengals Breakdown every Sunday night, and we do a turning point. And I think it was Joe's turning point was the Trey Hendrickson injury because, like you just said, if Trey's out there, they're winning one, I think, if not both of those games. He's such a difference maker on this defense. And also the leadership aspect that he brings to this defense now with Logan Wilson gone. I feel like they're kind of missing that leader. And I feel like Trey Hendrickson brought that and brings that. I don't have any updates other than what everyone else is hearing. It definitely seems like something that's lingering. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to go. I know that, there was, like you said, some hope that, after rest, after the bye week, that he was going to be back. And then we heard that he wasn't. So that was kind of a surprise. So I think it's just something that we're going to have to see weekly. But yeah, he's such a difference maker on this defense. We know that. And so I do think that has been a big part and played a part in those close losses that we've seen.
You mentioned Logan Wilson, and you sat down with him a couple of weeks ago at Newport on the Levee. Obviously, he is now gone. And, I've kind of got some mixed feelings about that. Obviously, the writing was on the wall when you took two linebackers in the draft this past April, and then you decide to bench him, and then it's really on the wall that he's probably on his way out. What was your reaction to the trade, and do you think the Bengals made a mistake there? Because part of me thinks they could have served a lot of benefit if he would have stayed around and kind of helped with Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. But what was your take on that trade?
I mean, when you bench a team captain, when you bench a starter, you, like you just said, the writing's on the wall. You know what's coming, and he wasn't going to just sit here and kind of sit on the bench when he could be playing somewhere else. So I understand it from Logan's side. I definitely think that it was a tough move for the Bengals to make. I genuinely didn't see it coming. I was surprised benching a team captain. I feel like that's rare. That's not something that happens. And I do feel like that's a culture difference maker in a locker room, because again, we talk so much about leadership. This defense is begging to have those leaders. There's so many young guys. They have Geno Stone and they had Logan, they have Trey, some of these older guys. But I feel like Logan was really such a cornerstone of the linebacker room. He was someone that helped Barrett, helped Demetrius, but I also understand that he didn't want to just sit on the bench and watch these guys play and play, without him being on the field. So I get it. But I genuinely was surprised. I will say Logan handled it like a pro. I talked with Barrett Carter in the locker room yesterday. We talked about Logan, and, he still is so thankful for everything that he's done for him. And so, you could definitely tell that those guys were close. But, Barrett said some really interesting stuff in our interview yesterday. I'm not sure if you heard, but he talked a lot about this organization having trust in him and Demetrius Knight Jr., which obviously they do with them starting, and that, he knows the gravity of the decision. He knows that this team wants to win, that this city wants to win, that they deserve wins. And he said that he feels like him and Demetrius have earned the trust to be starters. So now it's kind of going out there and proving that trust. So I think that that's kind of something that we're going to be able to follow the next few weeks here in the next few games, of them stepping up into these starter roles and, maybe even leadership roles, because they don't really have, too much above them now.
The safety position, of course, has been a struggle for Cincinnati this year and last year, really. And Geno Stone, of course, restructured his contract coming into this year, but he's still out there for a lot of snaps, the majority of the snaps, and the performance certainly hasn't been up to snuff there at that safety spot. Any idea why maybe they haven't tried somebody else there? I know a lot of people have suggested, like, why is Tyson Anderson not getting a chance out there? Or maybe a guy like P.J. Jules. There's got to be something going on behind the scenes that shows the coaching staff that, no, we're best off rolling with Geno here. But any thoughts on that position?
I want to say that I think a lot of it is because of Geno's experience.
Yeah.
We know what he did when he was in Baltimore. Obviously, that hasn't really translated much when he's been here in Cincinnati. But again, that's another guy that he does bring a lot of leadership to that DB room. He had a meeting with Jamar Chase after the loss, and they spoke. I went up to him and I asked him what the conversation was. He told me he didn't want to tell me. But he did say that it was beneficial for the offense and the defense because, we saw after the Bears loss, some tension started, popping up in the locker room. And so I think that Geno is kind of a guy that is a leader in that group. And I'm not sure if that's where it's coming from with the Bengals front office and with the Bengals management. But yeah, I think that Geno he's very confident. All the guys on the defense are genuinely very confident. They're very confident in their abilities. They know that they haven't played to their best abilities. That's kind of the vibe that I get, at least. But they're still confident. They don't lack any confidence. So, I'm not sure why the team hasn't tried a different direction, but it seems like they're sticking with Geno.
I was talking about this before you came on, the running back spot with Taj Brooks. Obviously, P. Ryan got banged up. He's probably going to be out for this game against Pittsburgh, I would imagine. And, the Bengals kind of at running back, it was kind of like a 50-50 split a little bit there with P. Ryan and Chase Brown. Obviously, last year when Zach Moss went down, it was pretty much 100% Chase Brown. Do you anticipate Taj Brooks getting an opportunity? Do you think the splits are going to be kind of even with Chase Brown and Taj Brooks? Or what do you think that will look like? Because obviously, the Bengals' run game the past few weeks really has improved.
Yeah. Man, I'm not sure. I think Chase will probably be taking majority of the reps. That's just kind of the vibe that I'm getting. Now, Taj has gotten a lot more involved in the return game, and he's shown that he, can do it and can be successful in that. I just think that this team leans so heavily on Chase Brown, in all aspects, not just the run game. He can line up as receiver and make big plays. So I think that Chase will probably be getting majority of the reps, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Taj come in a few times. He's done a great job, and I think he's learned a lot from Chase and Samaje. So I think his time is definitely coming for sure.
Was talking about this as well with the offensive line. That got a lot of criticism and a lot of attention, certainly in the preseason coming into the year, the first few weeks, and that kind of has simmered down a little bit as all the attention kind of has gone to the defense. You got two rookies out there, Jalen Rivers and Dylan Fairchild, of course, there as well. And I think going into the year, if you said those two guys were going to be two starters for you for a really long time, a lot of people would have said that's crazy. But now as they continue to grow, and obviously it's not perfect, but do you anticipate that this offensive line could look really similar to the way it does now next year?
Yeah, I can see that for sure. It's funny you bring them up. We had Dylan and Jalen on our live show at the Levy last night, and Dylan said what he said when he got drafted, and it was that he would die to protect his quarterback. And that's the type of guys that you're getting in Jalen Rivers and Dylan Fairchild. They want to succeed. They want to be here in Cincinnati. They want to be here in Cincinnati long term. And I think that's so important to have in a rookie where they already are like, I love it here. I want to be here. Jalen said that. He was like, I love it here. I want to stay in Cincinnati. I want to retire a Bengal. So just hearing that, I think, is really cool because that's not something you hear a lot in the NFL. Guys move around so much. So just hearing that is really great. And they've proven that they can be starters on this team. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if we see them again next season. The offensive line, they were under fire so much the first few weeks. And the way that you can always tell like if a position group is under pressure, under fire, is like all the reporters are going to them after games or during the week, right? And so we were always talking to all the offensive linemen, and that was like our number one target for the first few weeks. Now it's a lot more towards the defense recently. So I think that's like kind of a gauge that you can be like, all right, who's talking the most, who's getting interviewed the most, and we've kind of backed off on the offensive line, which I'm sure they're appreciative of because they know the outside noise. They hear it, they understand it, and I definitely think that they've come together as a group. Obviously, there's stuff that needs to be fixed. There's penalties that need to be cleaned up that we've seen the past few weeks, but I think that as a group, and with Jalen and Dylan as well, they've really fit into the Bengals offensive line well.
Gabby Sorrentino joining us live here from Fox 19 for a couple of more minutes. Let's talk back to the defense again. Obviously, a lot of young players playing. I've been hard on Shamar Stewart. I think a lot of people have. It's hard not to be, especially after the drama this offseason with his contract. But him specifically and the two rookie linebackers, you can't really quit on them yet, right? You got to, continue to stick with them, and hopefully they get better. What's your kind of just general outlook on those three players on the defensive side of the ball? And is this something that can get cleaned up this offseason, or is this something that's going to take like multiple years in order to get fixed?
That's always a good question because when you have a rookie, you just don't know. You don't know. I think Shamar has been battling injuries, which hasn't helped because I feel like we haven't seen him, at times this season 100% healthy. So it's been hard to kind of fully grade him and fully see what his capabilities are because of the injuries that he's been fighting. Of course, everybody wants your first round pick to come in and be this, star and be this giant difference maker on the defense. But when you have a guy that's been injured and hasn't been able to possibly play to his full potential, I do think that's difficult. But I understand where, fans' criticism comes from and all of that. With Barrett and Demetrius, I think that the organization has put a lot of trust into them, obviously. We know that we just talked about them benching Logan Wilson and trading him, and those guys are getting all the shine. And we've seen them have some really great moments. Of course, we've seen them have some not so great moments, but that's being a rookie. in the NFL. I think that it's just going to take experience. It's going to take games. It's going to take different situations. This team has just been going through it this season. I said it last night. I was like, this team, just despite everything, they're still in it, which is just crazy to think about. Because, I feel like a lot of times you've just been like writing it off at this point, but they're still in it. There's still a shot. And I think the guys know that. I think these rookies know that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that no one's giving up in that room. No one is ready to write the season off. In fact, they're all just talking about winning. And I think that's so important. So I've been, I think the rookies just need time and experience. And I think that, that's just going to happen throughout the season in all the different situations. And they've already seen a lot of different situations in the first half of the season. So yeah, I think that just comes with experience. And obviously, Shamar being hurt just has, hurt him ultimately.
Bengals-Steelers, obviously this Sunday, a chance to go to 3-0 in the division, which certainly would be pretty cool. Is there a specific matchup or something you got a close eye on in this game? Obviously, TJ Watt is always an issue when you're going against Pittsburgh, but anything in particular you're going to have a close eye on?
I mean, it's the Unk Bowl part 2.
Right.
So we're all excited for that. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe, the last time they played over 60 combined points and ended the way it did. Such a close game. I think we're going to see more of that this Sunday. I think whenever, it's an AFC North game, get ready for that. It is nice that it's not in January this year, because I went to the Bengals at Steelers game last year in January when I couldn't feel my toes for like days later. So it is nice that it's in November, and it should be decent weather. I'm not sure what the weather is in Pittsburgh this weekend, but yeah, I'm definitely looking at the two quarterbacks. And look, we saw the Steelers offense last week against the Chargers, and they did not look good.
Right.
We know what the Bengals offense can do. We know what they're capable of. They're putting up so many points every game. So I think if this defense can step up, can make some stops, can make some turnovers, can make tackles, can play clean football, I think the Bengals have a really good chance in this game, just because of the chance that Joe Flacco and their offense gives them every single game. That's what I'm looking at. I think this is going to be a big game for the defense, because, AFC North games, it's a lot of defense. I think that is kind of what I'm circling of. If the defense can make these big plays, stop Aaron Rodgers, make impact in their run game, impact their pass game, I think that the Bengals will win this game.
A lot of people in the fan base, obviously very impulsive, but lots of people calling for wholesale changes, right? Zach Taylor, Al Golden, Duke Tobin, you name it. If I sat here and said Zach Taylor, Al Golden, and Duke Tobin are all back for next year, what would your reaction be?
Man, that's a good question.
'Cause I personally don't think I'd be surprised at all if they were all back.
No, yeah, I don't think if you're saying all three.
Yeah,
I'd say there's probably a good chance that they're all back. It's so easy for people to play the blame game and put it on coaches and management, and I get it. I understand. I am a fan as well as a journalist. I've been a sports fan my whole life, so I understand it. But Al Golden's only been here for a few months, right? Like, I don't think it's fair and he inherited a past defense. Like, he hasn't been able to fully build this defense from, ground up. He started with some of the draft picks they made, but he hasn't been able to fully, get free agents and sign people. And I think that's going to be a big thing in this offseason, is looking for veteran guys, not necessarily putting all your draft picks on the defense, looking for veteran guys that have proven what they've been able to do in this league and can win and can help a team. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And maybe determining how this offseason goes is going to determine who stays and who goes maybe the next year. So I think this is a huge, I know we say this every season, but I really think this is a big offseason for the Bengals, for being able to find those guys, being able to make trades, being able to do these things to help the team, to get more draft picks. And that, of course, falls on Duke Tobin. That falls on Zach Taylor. And then you kind of go from there. But when you have Joe Burrow go down and, Zach Taylor's moving around quarterbacks. He's doing all these things. Like, you can't put all the blame on him. And I understand that it's all over social media, but it doesn't all fall on Zach. And I mean, look at all the other NFL head coaches that have lost their quarterback this season. The quarterback injuries, I feel like this year have been crazy. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if they're all back next season.
Lastly, Gabby, let everybody know all the fun stuff you got going on at Fox 19, where we can find your work. Obviously, you got the show down at the Levee, and just all the stuff you got going on at Fox 19. Let everybody know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This has been great. We do a weekly show called Bengals Now every Wednesday at Newport on the Levee at 6. We have 2 Bengals players come on. It's free. It's a live show. They do autographs. There's fan interaction things. I do a fun segment where fans can ask the players any question they want, which is really fun. We always get fun ones. So we do that. And then, we have our Bengals breakdown show at 11:30 every Sunday night. We do exclusive interviews. We break down everything that happened in the game. We do all of our locker room interviews there. So that's a really great half-hour show. I'm mostly on Twitter, so that's where I post most of my content. I also have a podcast, Offsides with Gabby Sorrentino. It's on Spotify, Apple, all the platforms. It's on a little bit of a hiatus right now. It's going through a rebrand, but it will be back. And it's really a lifestyle sports podcast where I interview the guys, athletes, Reds players, Bengals players, just talking more about life off the field. And so it's been really fun to get to learn more about some of these guys. And it's a cool chance for fans that don't get to interact with them and speak with them every day as well to get to learn more. So that's been really fun. So always busy, always a lot of stuff going on, but I love it here in Cincinnati. It's been great. So yeah.
Awesome. Are you going to the game in Pittsburgh, or are you in the studio this week?
I'm not. I will be in the studio this week. And then I will be going to Baltimore for the Thanksgiving.
Going back home.
Going back home. Yep.
Well, Gabby, I appreciate you making some time for us here on a busy week, and would love to do it again soon. Great stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. See you later. Gabby Sorrentino. Tremendous stuff. Fox 19. Make sure you check out all of her work. Great stuff there on the Bengals. Obviously, we went through it all. Joe Burrow, offense, defense, you name it. That conversation will be up on YouTube later today. Also, you can find it in podcast form as well, wherever you get your podcast. Big shout out to Gabby Sorrentino. Hopefully, she can be back on the show here soon. We'd love to have her as a regular guest here on the show. All right, transitioning our conversation here away from the Bengals for the final 20 minutes here on the show. I do want to talk Brian Daboll and the New York Giants. Obviously, that's kind of been the news of the week a little bit in the NFL. Just obviously the Giants moving off of Brian Daboll here in the middle of the season. Have a young quarterback. It was his guy, right? Jackson Dart. There's a lot of different people that have different opinions on that. And we certainly kind of broke that down on the show for quite some time earlier in the week. But now I want to roll through some replacements here for Brian Daboll, because I think there's a lot of guys that are going to want this job, because it's the New York Giants, right? It's New York. There appears to be a franchise quarterback in place on a rookie deal. There's talent on this team, right? They got a left tackle in Andrew Thomas. They can get after the passer. Abdul Carter is going to be a really good player. Obviously, you got Malik Neighbors there on the outside who has the injury, but, he's expected to come back next year, and he's a really good player. The running back spot, Scadaboo. He looks like he's a solid player. So there's a lot to build around there, and I think if you're a coach, you definitely have a lot of consideration when it comes to potentially wanting to be the next guy in New York. Obviously, Mike Kafka is their interim guy, and we'll see how he does. You got to be careful with the interim stuff, right? He's going to have an opportunity here to win over the locker room. He's going to have an opportunity to win over the fan base. He's going to have an opportunity to win games. Obviously no Jackson Dart this week, but he probably will be back after that. And, you got to be careful when we got the interim head coach, because everybody loves the interim when they're winning, right? But I don't necessarily think it's the right move just to promote the interim guy. Be very clear here. I think it would be a mistake if the New York Giants just promote Kafka and he's the next head coach, regardless of the success he has the rest of the way. So that's a name that obviously you got to throw out there to begin with. Then, of course, is Bill Belichick. And Reed talked about this on Off the Bench. Bill Belichick at this, look, he's probably right now the greatest NFL coach of all time. I think Andy Reid is certainly closing the distance. Maybe he has surpassed him. That's an argument for a different day. but, he's up there in age, right? He's in his mid-70s, and you've got the distractions off the field, right? He's free to do whatever he wants. He wants to date a 24-year-old. You can go out there and date a 24-year-old. But NFL teams aren't going to want that baggage. They're not going to want to have to deal with that because that will always be a storyline wherever Bill Belichick goes throughout the rest of his career. Oh, what's his girlfriend doing? Oh, let's cut to his girlfriend here on this TV broadcast. And when you're in the NFL, there's no time for funny business like that. And honestly, it's probably driving Carolina crazy, right? That he's in, doing this, and just kind of, it's just it's a distraction, right? Is the simplest way you could put it. It is a distraction. Again, free to do whatever he wants. That's fine. I'm not going to sit here and judge him. Do I think it's a little bit weird? Yes, I think it's a little bit weird, but he's free to do whatever he wants. But his whole thing in New England was no distractions. Well, that's as big of a distraction as you could come up with when you're doing something like that. But even putting that aside, right? We talk about this with Brian Kelly, how he just wasn't a pleasant human being to be around, right? And ultimately, when things went bad, he was out quickly. Zach Taylor, things haven't been good. He's a great human being. He's still here, right? Bill Belichick, you can act how you want with the media. You can, be just kind of an unpleasant person, but if you're winning, it's fine. Well, the second he stopped winning in New England, he's gone. And I just don't think New York is going to want to do that, right? Obviously, there are ties, right? Belichick's going to want the job, obviously. He has ties to the Giants organization, the ownership family. There is a relationship there. But I just think there's so many other candidates that you would rather go to, and you just don't want to have to deal with the whole mess that is Bill Belichick right now. So that's a no for me. Spags is another guy. Look, he's tremendous as a defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, he has been a DC for a while, and that's telling, right? Because usually when you have a coordinator that is orchestrating a unit that is just executing at a super high level, and that's something the Chiefs defense has done for quite some time. Their hat is getting thrown in the ring for these head coaching openings, and you haven't really had that with Spags. Obviously, he was once a head coach years ago, I think like 2011 with the St. Louis Rams. Absolute disaster, right? So, that obviously didn't go well. That was a long time ago, but he's gotten some interviews. He has an interview with the Giants previously, so maybe that's a name they interview again, but some people are just meant to be coordinators, right? And, I'm sure he wants probably another chance. If I was with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in Kansas City winning world championships, I probably would be content. He's making 7 figures, right? He's had a great career, and that's a place where everybody loves him and everybody respects him. Does he want to challenge himself again and be a head coach? Maybe, but again, if I'm the Giants, there's a reason why he hasn't been hired as a head coach here recently. This one's interesting. Lou Anarumo. Longtime Bengals defensive coordinator, now currently the DC in Indianapolis, doing a terrific job as their DC. Has lots of connections to New York, has previously coached there before, has ties to Joe Shane. They were together like 6 years, I think, 5-6 years in Miami. And Anarumo's son is actually a scout for the New York Giants. And if you remember here in Cincinnati, when the defense was playing well around the Super Bowl, people were talking about, Lou Anarumo being a head coach, right? I remember he interviewed for the Arizona Cardinal job. Obviously didn't get it, but there was a point where he was like, he was a candidate to be a head coach. And then the defense started playing bad the past few years, and then he gets fired as the DC. But now I'm not surprised that he's getting head coaching love once again after his unit is performing the way they are in Indianapolis, right? Because clearly he was a scapegoat here in Cincinnati. Clearly he can coach, and I think teams are starting to see that, right? And honestly, if I'm another team and I see what he did, leaving Cincinnati, getting fired, going to Indianapolis, I go, I like this guy. So I think Lou Anarumo could be a guy to keep an eye on. The argument is, well, Jackson Dart, you want to bring in an offensive guy. Well, you had an offensive guy. You had an offensive guru that you just fired. So I think, Joe Shane's vision is definitely something that needs to be considered, because I don't know. Are they going to bring in a defensive guy, or are they going to bring in an offensive guy? Antonio Pierce obviously won a world title there. He's beloved in New York. He was the interim guy in Vegas, and then remember what I was just talking about earlier with Kafka. He was the interim guy. The interim tag gets removed. He's the guy. And how'd that go? Yeah, he went, 3-14? It was a disaster. Look, I would not hire Antonio Pierce. That would be a massive mistake if you're the New York Giants. This name's interesting. Mike McCarthy, right? Now, I know that's not a quote-unquote sexy name or a big-time name or a young, upcoming guy. All he does is win. That's all he does is win. And he was kind of, put in a bad spot there in Dallas. All he was doing was winning 12 games. Couldn't win in the postseason, and that certainly is significant. But winning 12 games with all the distractions there in Dallas with Jerry, won all those games in Green Bay. You could say, well, he should have had more success, should have won more postseason games. Only has the one Super Bowl. Well, he does have the Super Bowl, and he's won a ton of games. If I am Mike McCarthy, 100% will be a head coach in the NFL next year. Candidly, I was surprised he wasn't this year, to be honest with you. If I'm the Titans, I want him. Right? If I'm the Giants, I'm calling him. Right? Is he like the, guy that's going to lead you to a world championship and years of winning for 5 to 10 years? don't have to get carried away, but he's going to stabilize your organization. That's what the Giants need because they got pieces. As I mentioned, they got the left tackle, probably have the quarterback, have a weapon, have a defense. Just need somebody to come in and stabilize it. I think McCarthy could do that. He's a guy to consider, and I would be shocked if he wasn't a coach in the NFL next year. Cliff Kingsbury, next up here. I talked about how some guys they're good coordinators, but they're not great head coaches. When Kingsbury was at Texas Tech, it's okay. Like obviously, they had Mahomes. That was great. Didn't equate to a lot of winning. In Arizona, did it equate to a lot of winning? No, right? He does a good job as a play caller for Washington. Obviously, they're struggling with Jaden Daniels here at this point, but he's kind of one of those guys where it's like, I don't know if he's a head coach. Good play caller, great with quarterbacks, good to have in the building. Don't know if he's a head coach. I'd stay away from Cliff Kingsbury there as well. This guy's interesting. Jeff Hafley, defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers, has head coaching experience. It was at Boston College. He didn't win at Boston College, but look, you could put Nick Saban at Boston College, and I would question if they'd be able to win there. Right? It's just a tough place. Done a great job as the DC in Green Bay. Was excellent as the DC at Ohio State. I think he was only the DC for 1 year, but he was tremendous there. Talk about the Bengals job potentially coming open. If it did, Hafley's a guy that I would have my eye on. I think he's going to be a head coach in the NFL. It's only a matter of time. Will it be next year? I don't know. But Jeff Hafley, I like him a lot, and he's a name to monitor here as well. And another guy that kind of fits that bill is Jesse Minter, who, of course, is the DC for the Chargers. He's going to get a lot of interviews this year. He probably will be hired as a head coach. Had success at Michigan. How would it translate to the NFL? It's translating well with the LA Chargers. I personally like Hafley more. But I think Minter's going to get an opportunity, and we'll see what he can do, right? He kind of seems like that next Mike McDonald type of guy, right? That works with the Harbaughs at Michigan with the Ravens, right? Or and then ultimately is head coach. So I think Minter's name is one that's going to get thrown around a lot. Also, Mike Tomlin is interesting, right? I've said this for a while now. Pittsburgh, are they going to lose out? No, but like if they go 8-9 instead of 9-8 this year, would you be surprised? I would not. I think Pittsburgh would be fine with him staying forever, to be honest with you. But I think at some point you just need to change some things up. And maybe Tomlin feels that way. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. The Pittsburgh Steelers are so proud that they only had these 3 coaches. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes you got to just turn over a new leaf and maybe move on. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I wouldn't fire him if I'm Pittsburgh, but I sit down with him and say, you sure you want to stay here? Like, we're open to go in a different direction if you are. Kind of hash it out that way. But if he's available, I mean, holy heck, that would be a great fit in New York because you need somebody that can handle that media. Mike Tomlin can handle the New York media, right? You give him a young quarterback, Jackson Dart, right? You give him an already solid defense. You just need him to be that CEO and, make sure guys are ready to go on game day and just kind of operate from a bird's eye view and just, be the CEO of the team. And that's something he's great at. He's great at the rah-rah stuff too. So I think Tomlin would be a tremendous fit with New York. LaFleur, another guy, we talked about this one off the bench. If the Packers fire him, 1, I would be shocked. 2, it would be stupid. But if LaFleur is available, you're the Giants, you're picking up the phone, you're calling immediately. You're the Titans, you're picking up the phone, you're calling immediately. If LaFleur somehow is not the Green Bay coach next year, he will be a head coach in the NFL somewhere else. I guarantee that. And a couple of wild card names. There's some people out there that think there's going to be one coach that jumps from the collegiate level to the professional level at some point going into next year. Obviously, Lane Kiffin is the top of that list. It's up to Lane what he wants to do because he's got, I don't know if I can remember a guy having this many options, right? LSU wants him, Florida wants him, Penn State wants him, Ole Miss wants him, right? I bet the Giants want him to some degree. I bet they want to interview him. Maybe not want him for sure, but they probably want to interview him. If the Dolphin job came open, they would have interest there as well. So he's got a lot of different opportunities here, and it will be fascinating to see where he goes. Or if he comes back to Ole Miss, I think that's a possibility there as well. Because if he comes back to Ole Miss and just keeps doing what he's doing, they'll build a statue for him there. He'll be a legend there forever. But he's got some feistiness to him. He's a very, intense competitor. I bet he wants to dip his toe into the NFL again at some point. And sometimes in this business, you just got to, when you have your opportunity, you got to do it. He can't be in a spot where he goes, that'll be there for me 7-8 years from now, and then I'll try then. Because what if you keep losing at Ole Miss? Shoot, what if you get fired at Ole Miss and then 7-8 years, nobody in the NFL has any interest in you? So, when you're a hot candidate, sometimes you got to go. Obviously, Ben Johnson did not go, and he stayed a hot candidate. But I think that isn't always the case with these coaches. So that's an interesting one. But the other college guy is Marcus Freeman. He's outstanding. He's in his late 30s. He's a young guy. It's interesting because his name was floated around for the Bear job last year as well. Again, one of those guys, you stay at Notre Dame, they'll build a statue for you. You'll win games. I think Marcus Freeman could win a national title at Notre Dame. He was very close last year, and he kind of ran into a buzzsaw there with Ohio State. But does he have NFL interest? I don't know. Again, if I'm LSU, Penn State, and Florida, I'm calling him. Hey, you got any interest in leaving Notre Dame if we give you a bit of a raise here? So Marcus Freeman's an interesting one there as well. But I kind of feel like this year there will be somebody that makes the jump from college to the NFL. And those are the two names that I would consider the most, Lane Kiffin and Marcus Freeman. All right, a couple of more minutes left here on the show. Let's see. A.J. Brown. Yeah, I did want to talk about this here. So A.J. Brown, he was on a stream or whatever, and basically it was like, yeah, you can drop me from your fantasy team. Which, I mean, what are you doing? One, this streaming stuff, and look, I get I'm in the media, I'm in the internet world, right? But, I mean, it's crazy how it just popped off, whereas these people, millions of people watch other people play video games. And that's just, I was never a video game kid, but that's, I don't know. It's crazy. But again, I'm in the same line of work, I guess. So I'm not banging on anybody for that. But to go out there and say that, I mean, what are you doing if you're A.J. Brown, right? I mean, you're in a spot where you just won a Super Bowl, right? You play for one of the most stable organizations in the NFL, right? You win a ton of games. You have a ton of success. You have a great quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Right? And you're the wide receiver one, and you're getting paid, by the way, like the wide receiver one. Are you getting the ball as much as you would like? No. Right? But you're going to, act like this and, in the middle of a year where your team has a good winning record and looks to be well on their way to more playoff wins this year? I just don't understand it. I do not understand it. Honestly, I'd be sitting there going, I'm making all this money. They're not throwing me the ball a ton. My body's probably in a good spot. I'm not getting hit a bunch because I'm just kind of running and nobody's, throwing me the ball. I don't think it's the end of the world, right? Because there's an opportunity for him to be fresh in the postseason. And let's be very clear, if the Eagles are going to repeat, they're going to need him at some point, right? So the why he acts like this, it's just, I mean, some of these wide receivers, man, they're divas. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around. But the way he's acting here at this point, Howie Roseman definitely is going to trade him this offseason. I would be shocked if he didn't. He's going to get picks back, and Howie's just going to keep the whole thing rolling, as he always does. But I don't understand it at all from A.J. Brown. There's a real opportunity here that he wins back-to-back Super Bowls. That could happen. The Eagles can win the Super Bowl. Absolutely. I'm not predicting him to do it, but they definitely could go out there and win the Super Bowl, and you're going to sit here and complain about making millions and millions of dollars and being the wide receiver one for a team that just won the Super Bowl and potentially could do it again? Don't get it. Don't get it. The Eagles foundationally as a team, now they've struggled around the football this year. Let's be very clear. It hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows in the run game like it was last year. They got some new pieces, guys banged up on the offensive line. Saquon obviously took a lot of hits last year. It's kind of a work in progress there, but very much at their core, they're a run-first team, and they want to figure that out. So they're run-first, they're tush-push, they're physicality, they're we'll-play defense kind of a team. They're not an air-it-out team. They're not the Cincinnati Bengals. Right? That's not what they do. So I don't understand why A.J. Brown doesn't understand that. And also, his running mate is Devontae Smith, who's one of the best twos in the league. I mean, off the top of my head, give me T. Higgins, but behind him, besides him, is Devontae Smith the best two in the league? Devontae Smith, I get he's a skinny guy and he's not very big. He's awesome at playing football. And if I'm Jalen Hurts, I want to throw him the ball too because he's going to catch it every time. So I just don't understand it at all for A.J. Brown. Drama at the receiver position, but you're not really in a better spot. What, you want to get traded and go to the Jets? You want to get traded and go back to Tennessee, right? Maybe L.A., the Rams is a better spot, or the Chargers maybe. But where are you going to go? You're in Philly. You're the one. You're getting paid handsomely. You're winning all these games. I don't get it. I don't get it whatsoever. Finally, Paul Skeens, he wins the Cy Young. He plays for the Pirates division. I obviously despise Pittsburgh, right? The city, the football team, the baseball team. I get it. Skeen's one of my favorite players in the league. That guy is a dog. He is an absolute dog. Knows how to pitch. It just looks different, right? I mean, obviously he's very gifted to be able to throw that fast and have that much nastiness to his arsenal of pitches there as well. I think he's the best player in baseball not named Shohei Ohtani, to be honest with you. And he's tremendous. He wins the award. Scooble, by the way, wins it in the American League. So, I mean, he's been dominant for a really long time, but the Reds, they're going to have to find a way to deal with Paul Skeens, and unfortunately they're going to face him. They've kind of danced around him. They've gotten lucky where they play the Pirates and they don't have to see him. Not going to be able to count on that every year. And it's going to be tough. You have to always go against them. And you talk about Reds killers all the time. Usually you're talking about a bat, right? But Paul Skeens going to be a Reds killer. That's just unfortunate. There was the rumblings, and I don't know if it was reporting or just rumors that he had interest in being a Yankee. And, I was happy with what he said. He's like, yeah, we're here. We're not winning, but I want to be a part of winning here in Pittsburgh. And he was very open, saying like, yeah, the other 29 teams in Major League Baseball, the entire Major League Baseball fan base, they don't expect the Pittsburgh Pirates to be a winning team. Nobody expects that. And he's right. They don't. But he says he wants to be a part of the solution, be a part of the change. But, he was already grown a little bit frustrated. This is a guy that is a winner at his core. And in baseball, it's tough when you're only getting the ball every fifth day. And even when you're getting the ball, you still need guys to hit in order to score runs, in order to get the win. So, it's not like he's the quarterback of a football team where he really has a lot of say in the success of the team. It doesn't really work that way in baseball. And, he's saying this now, and I applaud him for saying this now, and he should at this stage of his career. But at some point, he's going to get frustrated. And he's got years of good baseball, barring injury, of course, ahead of him, where he's going to be very, very dominant. And if he does this for a few more years and the Pirates don't show any signs of getting out of the basement of the Central, he's going to get increasingly frustrated, and he's going to want to go somewhere else. And candidly, I don't blame him. And also, I don't have any belief that Pittsburgh's going to be able to turn this around and be a formidable force in the Central, let alone in Major League Baseball there as well. But Cy Young, Skeens, no surprise at all there. And obviously, Murphy got the Manager of the Year. We talked about that yesterday. And Tito, runner-up for that. We'll see. But that's kind of the news of the day in Major League Baseball. All right, another good show here on a Thursday. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Certainly had some quality viewership here on the show. Big shout out to Gabby Sorrentino, Fox 19 sports reporter, covers the Bengals, does a tremendous job. Great interview with her. Some great stuff really all across the Bengals team here at this point. That will be out on YouTube later today. Whole Thursday edition of the show obviously will be up in podcast form there as well, so make sure you check that out, along with a couple other segments there as well. Be on the lookout for those, and obviously clips on social media, as always, are up on our social medias here at Chatterbox Sports. Mine as well, at StoneShields_ and at the Stone Shields on Twitter. We will have another show tomorrow, obviously, before the weekend. Lots to discuss tomorrow. We will do our college football weekend preview, as we always do. We'll do our best bets of the weekend on the heels of a 4-1 week. We'll see if we have a guest tomorrow. Definitely probably will early in the week next week. Not sure if we'll have somebody else on talking Bengals tomorrow. We're still working through that here at this point, but be on the lookout for that. We'll be live tomorrow. Reed Mouse off the bench. They'll be live tomorrow there as well at 10 o'clock. So another 2 hours of content coming your way live here on the channel tomorrow, 10 to 12. And I appreciate everyone, as always, for tuning in. If you missed any parts of the show, that's totally fine. It's out in podcast form wherever you get your podcast. That will be up later this afternoon. Appreciate everyone, as always. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, take care, everybody.